Welcome everyone to YouTube Masterclass. This is COURSERA. It's taught through Harvard, USC, and CALARTS. You can choose a school that you'd like to take the credits for. If you're going to that particular school through COURSERA, it'll account for 4 credits in those schools, universities, institutions. This credit's for you. We want you to learn about filmmaking criticism, and the history of filmmaking goes into that. And we also want you to know about film criticism, which is the same thing except it's the narrative or the non-narrative film that you have to deal with in terms of how you break it down and critique it and look at it from the different angles to look at a film. Some people look at a film from a hierarchy of positions, like a Kurosawa or John Ford film, that all the positions are moved into one mass hierarchy. But today we're going to kind of surprise everyone and go down a road that I've been wanting to go down for a while. And I know that I have discussed the Apu trilogy before with my trilogies, Anthem, and that the Apu trilogy got much celebration in the first semester. That Bresson is getting a lot of celebration all throughout my semesters is not enough to say there's enough on Bresson, but there isn't enough on Bresson. There's only 10 or 15 books since the Bresson craze really started in the late 90s, around the time that all film that was French, that had even been through the New Wave and back, was just discovered. Now, I've got a gang load of films. For as many films as he didn't make, Bresson only made like 18 or 19 films, and here I have 7 of them, and there's still 8 that aren't here. I don't have The Trial of Joan of Arc, for instance, or A Gentle Woman, or Four Nights of a Dreamer. I don't have those ones, but I do have Pickpocket. I don't have L'Argent, but I do have Lancelot of the Lake, The Devil Probably, La Dame du Bois de Boulogne. You know, that one. I've got that one here on DVD, Criterion Collection. Most of these are. A Man Escaped. That was a New Yorker video that I got. Diary of a Country Priest. That's Criterion. That's beautiful. And Alhazard Balthazar. Now, to break these films down into one filmmaker, you could kind of see right off the bat, if you've seen any of these, how they could be made by the same filmmaker, because he takes Impressionism to where Pasolini takes realism. He takes it out to the very simplest touch of the wind in Bresson is something to look at as movement, because they're so subtle is the movement in a Bresson film that you could kind of see one film to the other, even though they're all magnificent and amazing films as they are. And a body of work to just go on and on, even though I don't have the first and maybe last couple of films he made, I have the Bresson arrangement. Anyone could see one of these films and fall deeply in love with the art of filmmaking, and that we press on as that it is the art of filmmaking is because the way he lights a shot so softly, like you can see in this Alhazard Balthazar. And another one I haven't got is Mouchette, but I've seen that one, and that has the same girl, and that she's in love with the donkey, and that the donkey is really talented, and it's a really smart donkey, and it's her friend, and that she takes care of it, and that she raises it, and that there's this innocence between childhood and pet, and it's just like this good wholehearted film. And it ends tragically and horribly, but that's not the way you convey most of the movie, as this kind of we get along with you suddenly, Bresson, even though you're going to tear it away from us, but not in that way, because we kind of respect him for letting the animal go through such animal domesticity as it did, because it's kind of like, would this have fallen upon this animal, or would it have died sooner had it not known this human? And really, the girl loves her donkey so much that she won't just give it up for anything. And she won't just give it up. That's the thing. She won't give up her pet. And she won't give up on finding her pet and getting him out of strange situations like the circus and whatever else. She'll go to great lengths to find her lost pet, and when she finds him, she realizes that that's because she was lost without him. And it's this beautiful meditation on how we are with our pets and how we love them, and we follow them around, and we know they're looking for us when they're lost, and that's just the way it is with that one. This is Diary of a Country Priest. I like how there's that ink blot knocked over. Oh, how many times do we talk about this film? It's the one I go over in my philosophy books. It's the one where, and I mean, you got to understand these actresses, although somewhat familiar on the screen, most of the time are non-professional actors, or what Bresson uses in his films. He uses the people that would match the form of the acting needed, but are already that way in real life, so he doesn't have to pay them or anything. They just appear in his movies, and if they all do it for a favor to him, is more of his independent style, because really you don't hear about directors who get favors from friends to get their movies made, and I applaud anyone like Bresson, who is now making this big comeback, and I hope that it continues to happen, where more people go out and see Robert Bresson and see what makes a Martin Scorsese film work in such a beautiful way, sees what makes a Tarantino film obsessed with, cinema itself, and that the priest goes through the motions and does what he's told by the upper clerics, is that he, even though there's no Christianity in the town he moves to, he opens up a church and goes through the motions, and nobody's there, and he preaches sermons no one hears. And a couple of the people he talks to in the town, it backfires anyway, and they were going to do something wrong anyway, and they did anyway, and the priest makes no difference that he's even there. He's kind of a summation of, well, we have cinema itself saying, it's here, it's present for us, we've seen everything go through it. And this is before Balthazar, which is another cinema as my pet, and I'm going to always go after it until it dies. And then this is, we may already be dead, but now the film has brought us back to life, and the film is the only thing keeping us to life, and when the film ends, we too will die, which is typical of a Bresson film. I mean, you would expect the priest to die in this, and that the priest dies lonely and without even a little bit of courage. That he's helped out anyone is to his credit only, that he ran church spotlessly as it should go. And to run church in such a fashionable order, I say then go for it, because Diary of a Country Priest starts to and Balthazar kind of demarcate that style of low-key lighting and soft blurry edges, although really honed in on one image or one human or a face for a while on screen, or long takes with sparse backgrounds and sparse foregrounds and things that are less decadent but more aesthetic to the rules of this kind of film noir look to an independent film, of this grainy stock of footage that's black and white and shimmers like a candle shimmers against the wall, and it shimmers on screen like this beautiful waterfall of cascade of whites and blacks, and they're just, it's like never been before. And all it is a human face for another 2 minutes, and it's just Bresson. He's beautiful, don't you think? The way he takes it all down to one little unit and spells that out in the whole impulse of the bit. So he'll crunch it all the way down to a close-up, and then phase out on the fact that that's down to the bit of the whole picture that he's getting at. And I think one problem I'm having with Bresson, in just giving him a splendor, in a minute we'll look at this book, Film in Transcendent Style, Ozu, Bresson, and Dreyer. And I remember the Bresson syndrome section is all about how he does sparse imagery that's aesthetic, that's impressionistic, that's transcendent, meditationalistic, that his films are meditationalistic. I mean, let's hear it for Paul Schrader on how Bresson's films are meditationally transcendent. I mean, that's a beautiful thing to say about Ozu and Dreyer, and that their films could communicate with the supernatural, spiritual world. I think that's a beautiful thing. But I don't know if that's necessarily always the case in Bresson, because sometimes it seems like he's showing the decay of cinema happening before him, even 80 years out from that. that he wouldn't have to deal with the cinema falling apart in his lifetime is totally alluded to in the fact that once this priest dies, he's going to be replaced, and this girl will never lose her memory because she'll always know what her memory was of this donkey that she took care of. And I think one thing we're forgetting as we go on to the next Bressonian film is that one thing he does is that he's sacrilegious in terms of anti-closure, cliffhanger endings abruptly, and that it's controversial to apocalyptically be abrupt. That is Bresson is apocalyptically abrupt, like in Diary of a Country Priest, where the priest falls over drunk from the wine and the bread, and that's all he's been eating for months, and it kills him because he's malnutritioned for the role of the priest, but that he never put in a letter to the syndicate to say he was dying of hunger was to no avail of him to die of actual hunger. So I'm not saying they're really blaming the bishopric or whatever they called it in that respect. I guess the papacy and tradition would have upheld that guy was only dying of a hunger fast because it was in God's will. And I think you can get away with that in some sermons in some towns. Like I know the Elmer Gantry thing is the more popular in America. That's popularized Jesus, and let's make it this club. Well, see, in what I like about the 60s film about Jesus is he's not really a superstar. He's one of these non-professional Bresson actors now, you know, being Jesus, like, I'm an everyday man. And I'm not saying that as like a pumped up pop cult fest, which wouldn't be bad either. But sooner or later, I think we'll all agree that these pop cultural things will take Bresson in because of the subcultural angle on having these apocalyptic freeze frame, everything just died that was beautiful endings or beginnings or placement cards. Or we think about how Kubrick always puts in a movement in his film that we can't take off our mind. We substitute it for the film, and it doesn't even have anything to do with the film. And I think Bresson's they're gonna find more and more. There's gonna be like, oh, the way he knocked that candle out was like totally like that John Wayne movie where he's lighting the candle with the lantern. Man Who Shot Liberty Valance. I think that it was before that as a film. How could it be? No, how Hazard Balthazar was after, and no one in their right mind would ever be able to feature a mathematician as a donkey. Balthazar was able to calculate numbers, and I mean they can show that as he scratches off a board that he calculates numbers, and this is just getting like really, really intense with the animals talking and the frames of like these squared in prisons. And I think what takes it further to prison is that Bresson actually did a prison escape film that was called A Man Escaped, and that you already know by the title somehow he gets out, sets up the suspense thriller, and that these films, Balthazar, Country Priest, are more like art films, but they're like nationalistic French poetic realism. In the sense they encapsulate national poetic realism, I can understand all that. But that A Man Escaped is straight up in prison, and that is one of the things that Bresson was always trying to stress about a camera taking prison of a picture, is that the picture is actually in the prison of the camera, that the camera is shooting angrily at the thing that is entrapped in its photo, and that's what is seen by the spectator as what's entrapped in the photo. And it's always been this kind of metaphor for prison or jail. For Bresson, who's never committed a crime or been to both prison or jail, it's just to him, it seems like it's an entrapment to cinema itself, but that it seems such a freeing media is what Bresson stands for, believe it or not. After all that depression we just saw, he was saying, well, I'd establish it as still an entertainment to see one that frees himself of the agenda of whatever it is he's on the agenda of, which in this case is filmmaking. So this guy actually escapes the film to escape the prison, which is all in film, and that's why he escapes, is because he gets out of the film, out of the prison, and that's kind of got one of those, you know, I've merged that ending with Truman Show before, because here you go. He finally gets out of the prison of the movie that he's trapped in. But in this one, it's seriously supposed to be the suspension of disbelief as prison. That we're actually in a prison is what it's meant to mean, and that it's the wiriest, dirtiest prison since Shawshank Redemption. There's no doubt in my mind why this one goes down as more of the realist form than even maybe Shawshank in its low-key lighting and how low-key lit prison really is, because I've never been there, but trust me, I'm channeling my friends from prison, and they're saying that real prison is low-key lit, that everything's dark, that it's darkness. That when you're in the prison gate, you don't know what darkness is till you've seen total darkness. And so I wouldn't even imagine that this film doesn't capture it as bad as it is, but I'm not trying to make second guesses on what is or what isn't. What I'm getting at is these ones where they escape. The guy usually is innocent that's escaping, and that he has a partner is very much John Renoir's Grand Illusion, where they escaped the prison and one of them died, and then the both of them got to Switzerland and escaped after they stayed with a young maiden from the north, and she fell in love with both of them. But that's Grand Illusion. This is just the story of from being in the prison and trapped unfairly, and then making your way in the next 45 minutes of real time, after explained a little at the beginning and a little will be explained. The whole process of getting out of prison is shown as it's done by the man in this film. Again, the movie Pickpocket, which we have in here, we have Pickpocket in here, you know, and we're saying that, like, the guy is becoming the crime that he's partaking in. That he is showing a how-to video on getting out of prison, or it wouldn't be called video back then, it would be film. Video wasn't really represented until the 80s, right? But that all this is on digital video, you know, that these masteries and these niceties wouldn't come to me just out of nowhere unless I'd studied the medium and known where to get them and gone through things to get these films, because these films don't come easy. You can ask anyone. Buying a copy of Pickpocket's not easy, even if it is available on Amazon for however much you're going to spend on it. These are not easy films to track down. And I'm not just bragging about that in my collection, because I belong to like some services that say, oh, your collection's so marvelous, we love it. And I'm like, geez, after so much of it lost and the rest of it is somewhere else in a corner that I need to go get through so I can go back to MASTERCLASS and teach the best I can on these films. Well, it's not that I'm trying to race through these Bresson films, because I have plenty to go. It's just that I want to explain that in each and every one of them, there's kind of this mastery of teaching a secret book on how to be the person that the film is about. On this one, it's how to be a priest. On this one, it's how to be an animal lover. And I think that how to be a priest really comes across in Taxi Driver, when they're going, well, they did that in France, when they're like, this guy's acting like a real priest. That this is to be how to get out of prison is just so controversial, because sometimes people are in prison for the wrong reasons and can actually make way with these devices to get out of prison every once in a while. I've seen it happen in my lifetime, but people have gotten out of prison this way, and exact way the film shows. That I'm not showing you that for that to happen, because I don't ever want that to happen to anyone, especially someone that was taking my class. I'm just saying that is the exact guidebook to getting through what you would do to break out. Now, this one is even more controversial, and this is Pickpocket, and this is the one I've got to pause for and talk about, because what I'm getting in these little sub-between intermixed pictures of Apocrypha are these hands going into a pocket, stealing out the money and putting it in their own pocket and walking away. Now that it's showed so covetedly than any other film, and already trained to do what is secretly to do, and that people won't notice that they're being pickpocketed, even though you can see in the picture there is a pickpocketing going on, and that he does it so close up and so aesthetic that it's like he's perfectly capturing these wallets, and you're almost, you know, in this action command forward move hysteria of being like, paraphernalia of stealing makes me want to just, oh, you know, it's like it's hypnotizing your mind to becoming like a kleptomaniac, you know. And then you're like, no, 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 I would never do that. Even though the film shows me exactly how to do that without getting caught, I would never do that. No, no, no. And then you kind of think, this is one of those films that controversial. Makes you want to say that you can do this just to do this, but that's not just what makes this film controversial. It's Bresson again, and if he's got your existential moral, it's no one. And if it's supernatural, then it comes from Kierkegaard, and that means there's no metaphysics, and that means we're going to the land of there may be no afterlife, and there may be no heaven or hell, which to some people is a good thing. To me, it doesn't mean anything. To the characters of Bresson, it means everyday living, and that is that we just do all what we can now to get by on what we can, and that Pickpocket is a totally spelunking story into the hearts of two men and the hearts of three beasts and the hearts of a woman is all because we're looking in the souls of men when we see a Bresson film about what it is, and that Bresson will intertwine you into magnetism, into fight you into a fury until you've fought with no other director from wanting him to just ban all of his films and take them all off the rack for being disgraceful, except for maybe this one, Les Dubois de Dames de Boulogne. And the reason I'm saying that is because even this one will get you all, make you mad. But it won't make you mad as to walk out and say, why is he teaching me immoral things like breaking out of jail and stealing from people's wallets? And I don't think that Ehud Balthazar, like Mouchet, is an accidental problem, and I don't think Alhazred Balthazar really has an anti-Christ message or has an anti-moral. And I'm not saying Christ is the center moral of all mythology, because we know mythology is aimed at the folklore tall tale. The Bresson does it in a way that's like a vampire going to dust in daytime or something. Like it's just this fallen icon of like this Nosferatu that he can never film but always wants to, And the Bresson is reaching out to audiences that don't normally see films at all, or films or French films, or just someone out there to see something that he's seen that was so brilliant that he had to put it in a movie, and that he's seen girls petting their donkeys so beautifully in a movie doesn't mean that any of us were ready for it. When it comes, it goes, it gets lost, she's after it, she's looking for it, and all spontaneously we don't realize the film is being as it's being made, which would kill us all to know that Bresson was just making it as it was making itself. We don't want to hear that. We want to know it was as meticulously as he planned, which really, it was as meticulously as he planned, because he always put in the crisis moment, wherefore he was going to fix it by the end of the film coming soon, or another rapture into another zone from where we are now. And that typically in one time and place we're found with certain characters in his films, like Die Every Country Priest, particularly A Man Escaped. We're always feel boxed in, but that we're feeling less boxed in toward the beginning of his career is interesting, because this one's more of a, we're the vamps of cruel intentions, and by cruel intentions we mean dangerous liaisons, and that this one is a dangerous liaisons battle, and it's so beautiful between the women that love the same man and that seduce each other into like witchery almost, to get each other's control over the same man and to love him, but like one be the city vamp, one be the town vamp type. And we're not trying to seduce we're not trying to antithesis here on women, because the women in Bresson actually have quite control. I'd say the weirdest one that doesn't have the most feminist of all is Joan of Arc, because in that one there's so many people against her that it seems futile that she's feministic at all. Well, what is this, A Boy and His Dog in reverse? It's like she's the only woman left that even has a voice. Well, maybe that is saying she had a voice, but that everyone's against her almost made it feel like a reverse German. All like, no, everyone's against her still, so she's basically a martyr of nothing, that she's going to whimper out into nothingness and be like fused out by the crowd, is more like what Bresson's getting back with Passion of Joan of Arc. And you're starting to lose this, like, well, then his women can confront anything, because I've seen Mouchette and she can confront anything. If I haven't seen Landscape in the Mist, we can confront anything as a woman, and that we have to all the time is like a sorrow of cinema's tale. The cinema is the tale of what we put women through too much of, because we just love them so much that we put them through all the hard work, all the heavy labor, everything hard there is to do about it, and then we just say go for it, and then get in there and show them that you're acting by either acting like it's too much or acting like it's not enough, because we need too much or not enough, and usually it's too much, you know. I'm not preaching on cinema's bang for your buck. I'm preaching on cinema and its cure all. Let's do all we can for the art, because we're going out with a freaking luster bang, and that is the way we love to do life. So, my friends, don't give up on Bresson being decadent, because actually in this film he takes on kind of almost an expressionism, if I may not say about film noir. That they're all film fatales coming from the Vamp catalog is not exactly untrue. And I think Bresson shows himself in this romantic vein as a poetic realist. I think that he could pull it off, and that he goes back lurching in the 60s and 70s into a couple of films we haven't gotten to, but we're getting to them. And that is first, Lancelot of the Lake, and second, The Devil, probably. But we have the rest of the time to spend on these, so let's go. Lancelot of the Lake. I don't know what to say except that the Lancelot and King Arthur and Guinevere, Princess Guinevere stories all told. Mordred, the guy that takes down Camelot and destroys Camelot and destroys King Arthur and Lancelot, is not even the half of what's seen in this film. What I love about this film is it kind of takes you through one of those sequences that you have to see in the film, that you relate to the film, that burns it into your memory what the film is about, that each one of these has those. Hers is of the severe petting of the donkey, that's expressing metaphors of how Hazard Balthazar, Diary Country Priest, is when we see the priest actually writing in his journal. We see that as a structuring metaphor of how the film is narrated to by the voiceovers, and that have voiceovers on Man Escaped are also a structuring metaphor of the key hitting the chambers of the gate going by, the jail gate going by, and that being the audio letting us know that the captain guard is coming with his keys, and because he rings them against the cage, and when he rings them against the cage, you know he's coming, that being the structuring metaphor, sound ID of the Man Escaped. Now, if you're following me so far, we've got pickpocket, and the thing that always we see in that is, of course, the how-to guide on pickpocketing, that Diary of a Country Priest. We also have his priestly duties being the structuring metaphor, and yes, those do hypnotize you and turn you into a priest for a while. So beware watching these films, because they really teach you, like, not just propagandistically, you'll be completely subrooting nothing but copycat criminalism activities to dressing up like knights in shining armor and jousting all day, because that's what they do in this film, is they joust the entire time, and as they're jousting, you're seeing like these different knights get like smashed down by Lancelot, because he's just captain of the joust team, and he keeps getting out there and wrecking everybody, and he wrecks everybody in the film. Is to no end one of the things I love most about Bresson's Lancelot of the Lake, that I always remember it forward, backward, like, listen, the ending has something to do with Lancelot lying dead in one of King Arthur's outgrove, like, witch doctor caves, and he's about to be helped but doesn't know if he's going to live, and pretty much thinks he's going to die, isn't really the very ending compared to whether there's another joust match or he lives to see it or not, in some of the subroot memory of my mind, but that it starts out with a Braille occasion to show how Camelot is this brazen territory, and then the very end is Mordred slaughtering them down with arrows in the forest, of King Arthur finally getting shot down, and Mordred firing down arrows on the the Knights of the Round Table, and they're all getting moored down, King Arthur and Lancelot and all of them. And Lancelot couldn't come save them. Maybe he wasn't there because he was back with his bludgeoned armor from a joust he lost, which is the exact opposite of how the beginning of the film was, where Guinevere's giving it out to both Lancelot and Arthur as quickly as she can between the two of them, so she can have them both, so she can have her cake and eat it too, is in this film, but it's all done in the Bresson that's hide behind the Ulysses, the dead metaphor of John Huston. Around the same time, you get like this John Huston night, but now you're sheltered with the piece on Camelot, being the guy from Camelot, making a movie about the end of Camelot. Well, that doesn't make sense, because Bresson, everything's mortal anyway, and going to end. Now that it's the immortal mortals, that they're immortal, but we all know that they're doomed, like worse than the gods to die, because it's worse to be a human than a god to die, technically. That's the advantage of God. Because when he dies, it was better than him, human, but some people don't like it when God dies worse. If God dies like King Arthur, then suddenly we're all like, oh, what a victorious wipeout of the kingdom, Mordred firing arrows. I mean, are we supposed to cheer that they're mortal, but they're the gods too? Or, come on, get my back here. If the mortals were already immortal, then, we'd cheer them on for a while, but then we're like, yeah, we knew they were going to just fight through it all, but that's not really why they have conflicts where they have the fall of the gods territory. See, that was all made up into the story of, say, the Ring Cycle, where the fall of the gods wasn't exactly where the story should have gone, but what inevitably the search for absolute power goes towards chaos and absolution and division and destruction and more chaos and division and absolution and destruction, and then it falls to a terminal of whether we live as a human species. And now I'm talking Blade Runner, but what I'm trying to say is that Lancelot of the Lake is a sheer picture on why he thought the Knights of the Round were mortally and immortally and immorally, more like, obsessed. That they had that obsession that gets in every eye of every Bressonian non-professional actor of being totally obsessed with everything and anything that is in frame of its punishing, is how we go out with Lancelot of the Lake. And I don't fear that there were not stretching metaphors to this one, except be it the theater, although the theater's not really envisioned, it's more of a chamber drama, a motif of a chamber drama, which really Dreyer is talked about with chamber dramas and melodramas, and that the Dames de Bois de Boulogne is a chamber genre means that it's kind of classical. It doesn't require the metaphors, but that the metaphors are the dressing rooms within, are one of the things that are nice and modernized about the romanticism in this vision. Now, the romanticism in this vision isn't just because Lancelot and Arthur enter in it together. As we can see, they get around to Guinevere on quite a rebellious anti-each-other level. But that Mordred is their enemy all along. They should have focused on more, because he kept saying he was going to kill them all. Now, how many times does Mordred have to say he's going to kill those guys before he just outright kills those guys? And everybody else thinks that scene isn't foreshadowed. But I'm calling that out. I'm saying that scene was foreshadowed. But that it's a great cast and it's a great presence, and I love what you can do with a Bressonian movie, how you can transform it to victory all the way. And there's one more I'm going to talk about, and then we're going to switch discussions to a book reading I'm going to do on Bresson. It won't take me but a minute to find. Well, that was Beyond Zen Culture. Hang with me, class. Transcendentalism. Ozu. Dreyer. I'm sorry, class. I should have been more notified than this. Well, that we're going to have to find. We found Bresson. And I'm going to read to you the very end of the Bresson. It says, Transcendental style, like Byzantine art, is a universal form because it can accommodate different artists and different cultures within a common structure. Byzantine art could reach from England and France to the Far East. Transcendental style can reach to wherever men make movies. The differences which seem so culturally unbridgeable can both function within transcendental style. Frontality can be both pantocrator or hierarchism, or it can be Zen politeness. Disparity can be both alienation between man and nature and man and God. Stasis can both be an acquiescent view of nature and a symbolic icon. Transcendental style can express the endemic metaphors of each culture. It's like the mountain, which is a mountain, doesn't seem to be a mountain, then is a mountain again. It is also like the prison in which a man is involuntarily enclosed, yet from which, through a dark night of the soul, he can escape, choosing instead to enter a new prison. In some, transcendental style can adapt to both cultures because it expresses the transcendent, which knows no culture. It is not a metaphor which is restricted to its antecedents. It is a form which is universally appreciable. So, let me boil down to what he's actually saying. Because, and I hate to use a term like boil down, but we only have so much time to express this massive quote I'm using by Paul Schrader. Paul Schrader also being the director of Cat People, also being and writer of the remake of Cat People and director. Paul Schrader of Mosquito Coast, Paul Schrader of Taxi Driver script. He's talking about Ozu Bresson. And Dreyer, and I think we have covered Dreyer so much. I mean, we go from The President and The Leaves of Satan's Book all the way to Dreyer's Gertrude, and how Gertrude is this feministic article of her seeing out of like a woman's eyes, and for the first time, and then we realize that Mouchette by Bresson does the same thing, and we're thinking it's around the same time, but we're not sure. Because Gertrude is like a little before Mouchette, maybe, or vice versa. And then you have these big time film directors working all at the same time, like Antonioni and Bertolucci, and a lot of them were Italian, French directors like Bresson, like Ofool, you know. That during this period of the 70s, there's like Rivette, and Rivette takes it all the way to the levels of the French New Wave in the 70s with Celine and Julie Gauboding. And that Celine and Julie Gauboding is by no hands, no barred the one we need to discuss right now, because that is the French New Wave film of the 70s. That it's like Daisies, but French New Wave and 3 hours and a half long. That it's never the same movie twice. That they're all eating this magic candy, and when they eat the magic candy, Celine and Julie hang out and eat magic candy, and when they do, they see themselves trapped in like this film. It's like this Dairy Foster commercial of like stereotypes, and that's the word we were avoiding earlier, and stereotypes are in the middle of this range of just being stuck in a film with only melodrama as it can. Like, it's like, which silent films he's not saying are, except they're somehow extremely limited by not having sound is the same as they're limited by their easy to do parts that are so stereotypical they wouldn't even want to be stuck in that role. And that's where we're getting to Schrader's transcendentalism. It's like they're going into the model, but they didn't necessarily want it to be that model, that they are going to have to get these models that they put themselves in out of that model and back into freedom, which either means stop eating candy and going into that model, or wait until they're let out of that freedom because that model finally stopped repeating itself, which is another oddity of that movie, that module keeps repeating and doesn't go forward, is of no consequence other than they get back into it when they can, maybe from the start or maybe later by eating magic candy. They don't really know what part of the movie it's going to be on, and whether it's even part of a movie at all, except for that it is part of the movie Celine and Julie Gauboding, right? But it's still not really a movie. It's like a dream sequence. It's like we're looking into their mind to see what they're thinking, but that we'd have to see that to see the movie means that it's in the movie too. It's in the movie too if it's in the movie. That's what I'm saying. And so I think that that's why Celine and Julie Go Boating is the most excellent example of what we love to do with our movies. We love for them to be exactly as we want them to be, like a chessboard setup. But then we love to go into the heads of the directors and mess around and say, this is the movie we want to see, you know. And you see that with performance, how the camera goes through the head. It's like now they're messing, the camera's messing with my head, man. The camera's going all the way through my head. And that it's head that's shown going through. Again, when you get shot in the head, I won't give too much about performance away, but I thought it was a Nicholas Roeg film is already outrageous because he made The Man Who Fell to Earth with David Bowie, that we can't forget in these rock and roll eras. That Robert Bresson is considered a punk in the punk generation is true among his transcendental style, that we may reckon he has transcendental style. And The Devil Probably, although has a part in it that I don't really like, it has a couple of parts that I wish were maybe scaled back on. A couple of things I wish they would have spent more time doing, but then they could call themselves exploitationists. That this is quite the exploitation film, that Lancelot of the Lake couldn't be as true, that this does have the whole exploitation era thing added to it and could have been in disguise as a trauma film even. I wouldn't doubt it. That it's totally my kind of Robert Bresson film, and this was hard to track down. This is The Devil Probably, and this is the one where it has such a nasty picture in it that I wouldn't recommend it to anyone that would want to get mad at me for seeing it. So don't get mad at me for seeing it, because there's some stuff in it that's pretty mean. But that he's not doing it to derogate against the thing he's showing goes to show that when you're showing things that are even shown as immoral, if you're showing something as immoral, you're still showing it, and it's immoral to show something immoral, don't you think? Or do you have to show something immoral to show how immoral it is? Yes, you do. I would say, how many people think you have to show something immoral to show how immoral it is? I do. I think you have to show how immoral it is to show us how immorally it really is. Because how would you know immorally how it really is unless you were shown something that was immoral was wrong? Because if the immoral thing was shown to be wrong, then showing it would be to prove its immorality, which is that it's wrong. And he doesn't side with the other side, ambiguity involved. But let me get to this whole punk happy ending of Bresson. Then you get punked out in all these films, like Diary of a Country Priest, you're going to learn about God, boom, nothing good happens and everything goes wrong. It's like you're going to meet these girls at the theater, boom, they're double-crossing each other, nothing goes right, everybody goes against each other. That not just do you have these like mousetrap endings that a man has escaped is all wired for, the boom, he's gone, his friend just died, but he carries on because he got out of prison, let's go on. It's like you get scarred on the way through. Every film comes with its own scar and earning, and you have to earn these films, because these films don't just drop out of the sky and onto your lap. Look, they're dropping out of the sky and onto my lap. I can't believe this. But look at this. Diary of a Country Priest is the absolute brainchild of everything that is. I'm frustrated with making movies. What should I make a movie about? It's the 8.5. We're drying up the inkwell. This is where we're going with obsession on making films. Even when no one's at the theater watching them, we'll be playing them because we think we're just going to do it because that's tradition. It's tradition of quality. Even forget that Truffaut just invaded the tradition of quality. Forget that these are all French New Wavers, especially Alhazard Balthazar, which is kind of right at the end of the New Wave, and A Man Escaped right at the beginning of the New Wave. And you're talking about Diary of a Country Priest being all in Truffaut's auteur theory, his auteur theory on proficient style among directors, and he's talking about Bresson's Diary of a Country Priest, and that's why we so get enamored by the inkwell spilled over on the cover, because Truffaut is using pen and ink to discuss how Bresson is the auteur of a lifetime, just from the confessions that are in the narration of Diary of a Country Priest. And so I've gone through it. I've looked at it. We've gone back and forward through it. One thing I can say that I do know about pickpocket, in closing, is that like we realized that pickpocket is Crime and Punishment by Dostoevsky. Now we can't talk a lot about Dostoevsky right now because there's some conflict with the Russians, but we can, in fact, pull this away from that and say this is more the metaphor that comes from that narrative, that although, yeah, he is controversial, he did perform with the narrative the thing that lacked before, and that was a structure that was from the contemplative to the subdued to the oppressed to the melancholy to the dead genre. It's kind of Zen, backwards Zen flow of consciousness that come from these, once again, transcendental, and that they're all punk in their apocalyptic finales is what I was discussing a minute ago and getting off track, because the punk edge is where we get the edge that it's never quite what it says it is, but it never quite says is what it isn't. That he's never quite fully in pickpocket without need, because he does have to save his mom from dying, and he's got to pay for her operation and stuff, so now he's on a pickpocket binge, but that he already pickpockets enough to pay for that and more, that he's still on a binge, and now he's just on a binge to be on a binge, and he's got a boss and all that, is one thing. But that the real trick with pickpocket is that Bresson, in the works of being so meticulous to the paradigm of his realism, of the way he makes realism, and in his terms of realism, he creates these kind of books as to how to make it happen for real, how to make, like, you know, a thing like pickpocketing real if he really needed it, but that's not why he's doing it. He's doing it as, again, in this large race of auteurs that love to do things in the cinema for the sake of cinema. So now he's like, not only will I teach you what pickpockets do, I'll teach you how they do it, and you can do it. And it's a little you can do it video. You know, you can learn through this. That's one thing about the realism of this, is it's so realistic. It's like, bet you can do it too after you see this. But that's not the only charge forward that I love about Bresson and pickpocket. And the second isn't just that he blows his stash buying a manager and going off charter with the fact that he's got to get more stolen goods within like an hour to even live up to his false time contract and whatever else he's buried himself into, that he's got to go pickpocketing, and so that his whole lifestyle has consumed him was where I was first interested in this, and the Paul Schrader connection to this, and how it's like your lifetime of criminalism can be your own obsession to the point that it is your criminalism that defines you as who you are, and that the name of him is pickpocket isn't just because he likes to do non-professional, utilitarian type, you know, like cinema povera almost in pickpocket sense, because you would have, although you have to be rich to be a thief in some sense, you do have to have deposit money, right, to throw back on, so no one notices. Oh, I'm saying too much. But you know what I'm getting at when it comes to the criminal rule, and nobody but Bresson rules the criminal rule in all of his, I mean, he's a smooth criminal in every one of his films. That's the punk. This serious transcendent stuff, yes, ashes to ashes, dust to dust. We know there might not be life after death. Life might not have the meaning it has now unless we give it one with life after death, but we probably shouldn't, because there's no way to really tell if there's a life after death. There's no way to know. So that there's no way to know doesn't give us right or wrong in this world, but some things do, and most of Bresson's characters deal with the wrong side of doing things, even when they're trying to be in the right, even when they're governed right, even when the right's not trying to be oppressive, and they all know that it's going to shimmer away one day in a cloud of bread and wine, and that they'll go off and poof out of existence one day, and that'll be the end of it. Doesn't ever hit you so hard then with Bresson, because Like when the donkey dies, and who has her Balthazar. I mean, we all feel like we're gonna die a little bit, and I think we all do die a little bit. That actually limits the amount of numbers in our days is when we see that donkey get shot. And I think I shouldn't have even told you that at the end of Hazard Balthazar, the donkey gets shot right. But you know what? Some things are hard to take in life. And if Bresson isn't it harder to take in some of those Johnny Got His Gun movies of Dalton Trumbo, then I'm not in it to win it, because this is my cinema. And we want the Robert Bressons who can bring their sack in here and show us their devil probablys and not be afraid to be scrutinized on the level of Kubrick and everyone else that got their toe on the line for being completely obsessed from the world and being completely changed anew from each movie to each movie and completely baptized in the immersion of filmmaking, and were completely ruled the cinema waves, whether there were new waves coming at him from Scandinavian countries and from European countries, and all of a sudden we've got Bresson rise to now, where we have him before all other filmmakers as the realist who's cutting edge on every level and going to use every kind of glim stairway as some kind of way to mask his own telescopic lens around his fortified cameras that move on a tracking very slowly, so slowly that you can't see it, and in some you can, and if you can, you're not watching the Bresson move to the art creature, because there's no other way than to express it than the camera as camera obscura I verite. And in the obscura, we have things that are symbolic, and in the verite, we have things that are realistic, things that are photos of, and the pickpocketing in between. You do have both the obscura because it's aestheticizing the picture and making it all montaged out, but you have the verite because it teaches you the very act of pickpocketing thing. And I keep re-stressing this isn't the point of this observation. It's just, I feel the subject hasn't been talked enough, and here I barely talked it. And we can't, there's even movies disappearing behind us. Oh, the devil probably. So, yeah, it falls on a couple of shots in that one. But ultimately, you're going to be so blitzed and watching these and just love life that you won't really notice that, like, well, you probably will notice the starkness, the darkness, the depression, the austerity, the shyness, the coyness, the deep depthfulness. You probably will notice the despair, the isolation, the loss, the loneliness. Those are all metaphors of Bresson. A little bit of a rise with the punk because of how despairing and isolation and loneliness and lost it gets in that modern metaphor. That isolation, loneliness, and loss come on every character in all these films in big-time ways, like that they all fall tragically, was one of the reasons I brought up the mortality, or immortality being mortal. Because everything is mortal when it suffers to moral, that are impressions of emotions. Because impressions of emotions breed mortality as though they will one day be gone, and so too will our conscious reflection of them. And I'm not so ever reminded any other place than these films and the others that I haven't and have seen of Bresson that are so empty and lonely and vacuous, that they're so brilliant and vibrant and transcendent on the one hand, and that they're so empty and scarring and vital to every film buff's argument and every crass concept of how these independent guys must be wrong with whatever they're on because they're trying some new cinema out, and that they just think that it's this godforsaken palace to the glacial ways, and that like they're running straight into it with Truffaut saying, no, that's not what we're talking about. We're talking about how the tradition of quality, whether we liked it or not, had come in there even with Gervais. The tradition of quality had come in there, Instead, it rests on these pictures that are turning out to be like what Celine and Juliet Go Boating are going to make fun of later, okay, in their solid genre melodrama films, because it becomes like that film Prison, only the film Prison of classicism and poetic realism, and everything I expressed in Marcel Carné that was great about Children of Paradise is now being summated as now we need jump cuts. Now we need jump cuts. Now we need all these pressure points that Bresson's already putting on to the new wave and beyond, and that these pressure points come along as opposed to the traditional style just to perform their own independent style is nothing short of what Bresson is already doing in his own poetic version of Haphazard Balthazar all the way in. That A Man Escaped is peremptorily saying the new wave will have jump cuts, but I only for to create tactile medium with the cinema I'm adjusting here. So we rank out as Bresson as one of the best. He's like Griffith, which we'll have a Griffith discussion. Hitchcock, which we've discussed. And Bresson, I'll have to keep discussing each semester. I think we'll take a little time for Bresson, because I don't think that we've covered even the half of it and what we could have described and how he cages loneliness with the box format is one thing, but how he spreads synecdoche from a small point that makes it seem like it's a small metaphor for something bigger than it that goes out from it. Like a whistle on someone's pocket could be synecdoche. But I love you all, Masterclass. I thank you for coming today. It was a really great class. I couldn't have enjoyed talking about Bresson more. That I really waited till the end to tell you he's about isolation, loss, okay, because everybody loses something, loneliness, and death. Well, that we described as death as innocuous even in his film, because if there isn't a hell, well, they ain't going to hell. Of course, if there isn't a heaven, guess no reward for what? For living this life? Nobody for going to church anyway? All right, well, if that's the ultimate picture of God, I'm in, because my religion is Bresson, and I worship Bresson, and in the name of Bresson we say, amen.